built in secrecy, she was a magnificent achievement of German technology, whose focus was fear and mass destruction.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the 20 greatest warships of all time.
Enormous vessels, crewed by thousands, bristling with massive guns and powerful aircraft. They can deliver terrifying destruction and turn the tide of history.
Number 20, CSS H.L. Hunley. Hunley was a Confederate submarine launched during the American Civil War.
Confederate Naval Secretary Stephen Mallory quickly authorized the construction of yet another innovative war weapon that the Confederacy hoped would turn the tide in their favor. A military submarine known as the Hunley.
It wasn't the first submarine in history, but it was the first to successfully sink a warship. It was still early days for the technology since it wasn't fully submerged, and the ship and crew perished after its famous attack. Its victim was the USS Housatonic in 1864, which sank following the Hunley's deployment of a spare torpedo, a very primitive weapon consisting of a bomb at the end of a big pole. We don't know why it sank following its successful attack, but the whole crew was lost. The sub was recovered a century later in 1970 and is now on display in Charleston.
When conservation work is complete, the Hunley will be placed in its own museum, a permanent resting place for what was in its day the only weapon of its kind.
Number 19, CSS Virginia and USS Monitor. We're cheating a little here, but considering the fact that both of these ships played a large role in making the other one famous, we decided to combine them as one entry.
Gentlemen, the beast, spawned by Satan to destroy the Union.
The CSS Virginia and USS Monitor were two ironclad warships who squared off against each other during the American Civil War. Called the Battle of Hampton Roads or the Battle of Ironclads, it was the first time in history that two ships made from iron engaged each other. The Union-controlled Monitor and Confederate-controlled Virginia fought for hours, but neither side emerged victorious. Although the battle may not have been glorious, it marked a significant change in naval warfare.
She's turned away. She's quitting. She's giving up. Do you want to go after her, sir? No. Our orders are to protect the Minnesota. Take us back to her side.
Number 18, USS Nautilus. Our second submarine on the list is the USS Nautilus, which became the world's first nuclear-powered submarine back in 1954.
Commissioned in 1954, the USS Nautilus changed the game as the world's first nuclear-powered submarine.
It was built during the Cold War, and to the Americans, launching a nuclear submarine wasn't quite intimidating enough. They had to send it on a mission, too, to show off how strong it was. In 1958, Nautilus completed Operation Sunshine, a mission to cross the North Pole by ship. It departed from Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and made it all the way to Greenland, prompting the commander to send the message Nautilus 90 North to the president. In 1982, it was designated a historic landmark and can be visited in Groton, Connecticut.
If you want to come check this out for yourself, the museum and the ship, they are open Wednesdays through Mondays, 9 to 5 through October.
Number 17, USS Missouri, BB-63. Also known as Mighty Mo or Big Mo, the USS Missouri was the site where World War II officially ended.
The USS Missouri is the world's most famous battleship. Her illustrious career spanned 3 wars and was marked by history-making events that made her a national icon.
She participated in numerous battles in the Pacific Theater, including assisting with the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Not long after, the Japanese officially surrendered, and the documents making this official were signed on board. Her service wasn't done yet, however, as she participated in the Korean War and provided support during Operation Desert Storm. Today, the 45,000-ton battleship is located in Pearl Harbor and serves as a war memorial and museum.
The world's most famous battleship is open to the public here in Pearl Harbor, across from the USS Arizona Memorial. The two together acting as dramatic symbols of tragedy and triumph.
Number 16, Trireme. This entry isn't one specific ship, but a type which dominated the Mediterranean during the Age of Antiquity.
The trireme is a premier example of political forces and technology working together to shape human history.
We believe it was the Phoenicians who developed them, an ancient civilization originating on the coast of the Levant in modern-day Lebanon. They were probably first seen in the 7th century BCE and were popular for roughly 5 centuries. After the Phoenicians used them, the Greeks, Persians, and Romans all adopted them, and could have even been seen during the early Roman Empire.
The high-tech Greek trireme, combined with the effective tactics of a highly skilled crew, transforms the warship into a virtual torpedo.
It was innovative for its speed, agility, and use of 3 rows of oars, making it one of the most efficient and powerful ancient warships. Number 15. USS Maine ACR-1. Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. That was the rallying cry after the USS Maine exploded and sank in 1898.
The appearance of one of America's premier battleships, bristling with 10-inch guns, helped reassure U.S. citizens in Havana.
The Maine, which was equipped with a range of guns, including 4 Gatling guns, 4 Hotchkiss guns, and 4 torpedo tubes, was anchored in Havana Harbor during the Cuban revolt against Spain. On February 15, 1898, however, she exploded, which resulted in the deaths of more than 260 people.
On February the 15th, the Maine exploded in a gigantic fireball that echoed throughout Havana's streets.
This was the catalyst for the Spanish-American War, as the Spanish were blamed for causing the explosion by yellow press such as William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. The Spaniards' culpability has never been proven, however, and the incident remains a source of controversy. Number 14. USS Yorktown. Yorktown was an American sloop of war fitted with 16 guns and launched in 1839. It became part of the Africa Squadron, and as such, its primary task was suppressing the transatlantic slave trade, which had been recently outlawed by America and the British Empire. It did a remarkable job patrolling the West African coast, intercepting illegal slave ships and cracking down on the despicable human traffickers who shipped Africans to the Americas. Unfortunately, it was wrecked on a reef near the Cape Verde Islands in 1850. The crew managed to survive, but ultimately the ship needed to be abandoned. Number 13. Ormenlungi, the Long Serpent. No one will refute the claim that the Vikings were some of the greatest sailors in human history. This group of Scandinavian seafaring people conquered the waves, voyaging as far as Baghdad and America. The Long Serpent is one of their most famous vessels. Built for King Olav Tryggvason in the 10th century, it was the grandest longship of its time. Documents tell us it had 34 pairs of oars, kitted for a crew of 68 rowers. This leads experts to believe it would have been approximately 148 feet long. Olav met his maker in the Battle of Svolder, and this is the last tale we have of the great warship. Number 12. Richelieu. The Richelieu was a French battleship, first launched in 1939 and decommissioned almost 3 decades later in 1967. It was one of the French Navy's most important warships during World War II, with a complex and extensive career. It was capable of up to 32 knots, making it one of the fastest and most armed battleships of its era. After the German invasion of France in 1940, Richelieu escaped to French West Africa, allowing it to remain operational under Vichy France. This remained the case until 1943, when it finally joined the Allies, eventually fighting in the Indian Ocean. It served as the French flagship until it was decommissioned long after the war's closure. Number 11. USS Nimitz CVN-68. The world's oldest serving carrier is the USS Nimitz, which is also one of the largest warships in the world. Nicknamed Old Salt, she's over 1,000 feet long and can travel at speeds as high as 31.5 knots. After first being deployed in the 1970s, Nimitz has provided support during both the Persian Gulf War and the war in Iraq. In 2010, she was awarded the Meritorious Unit Commendation for her service in both Iraq and Afghanistan in the mid-2000s. Ships like the Nimitz are why the United States Navy is so powerful. Number 10. Geobukseon. Geobukseon, also called a turtle ship, was a remarkable warship crafted by Korea during the 15th century and a central part of the Joseon Navy until the 19th century.
The turtle ship greatly helped Korean naval forces beat Japanese invaders in the late 16th century. There are few historical records to detail the actual figure of the warship other than movies or TV shows.
Some believe it to be one of the first ironclad warships, with a covered deck useful for protecting its crew. It was originally developed during the Imjin War by Admiral Yisun Sin when Japan sought to invade Korea in 1592. These ships were instrumental in preventing the invasion, winning a total of 16 battles against the Japanese Navy. Its design influenced naval warfare not only in Korea, but across the entirety of East Asia, showcasing the brilliance of Admiral Yi Sun-sin.
The new finding is considered significant as it suggests the turtle ship was in operation until 1842.
Number 9. Mikasa. Mikasa was a battleship built in the 1890s for a freshly industrialized Imperial Japan, which famously squared off against the Russian Navy at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905. It was the first modern battleship owned by Japan and played a pivotal role in Japan's victory over Russia. Admiral Togo Hihachiro used Mikasa as his flagship and then devastated the Russian fleet, which lost most of its ships. This was one of the most significant wars in history since it showed Japan could compete with Western powers and fueled the imperialistic mentality that would eventually cause the Pacific War. It now sits in a historic museum in Yokosuka on the edge of Tokyo Bay. Number 8. USS Johnston, DD-557. USS Johnston was a destroyer built for the U.S. Navy in World War II. Its most famous moment was the Battle of Leyte Gulf, one of the largest naval battles in history.
But the Japanese guns were too big and too many.
Johnston is dead in the water and crippled, and these Japanese destroyers are just firing round after round after round into the ship. And finally, Johnston sinks. And one of the Japanese commanding officers was observed to actually salute the U.S. ship as it went down.
It was fought over 4 days in the Philippines, and Johnston was part of a task force that faced a much larger Japanese fleet. Despite being overwhelmingly outgunned, Johnston took part in a legendary last stand, launching a daring torpedo attack at the Japanese ships.
The wreckage will remain untouched, but its discovery has brought to the surface the astonishing story of the USS Johnston.
Unfortunately, the ship was eventually overwhelmed, but the heroism of the crew was historic, and the captain, Ernest E. Evans, was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Number 7. HMS Dreadnought. HMS Dreadnought revolutionized warships. First deployed in 1906, it was the first dreadnought ever crafted.
These were the war machines that sparked the arms race that changed the world.
It was a menacing, dangerous-looking ship, and everybody wanted one.
These were the Dreadnoughts.
It had remarkable speed and firepower for the time, with 10 12-inch guns and able to reach speeds of up to 21 knots. It was so powerful, it kick-started a naval arms race between the UK and Germany, with countries all over the world racing to build dreadnoughts.
The US, France, and Japan all set about making their versions of HMS Dreadnought. But it was Germany's response that worried the Royal Navy.
HMS Dreadnought itself saw little action during its time, eventually being decommissioned in 1919, but the impact it had on the world was monumental, influencing naval engagements and strategies throughout the entirety of World War I. Number 6. USS Enterprise, CV-6. Another of the heavy hitters from World War II on our list, the USS Enterprise CV-6 was involved in more naval engagements with Japan than any other U.S. ship.
The decorated ship is in for a massive overhaul to make her even tougher and more deadly.
Known as the Big E, she became something of a mythological ship to the Japanese. They believed they had sunk her on numerous occasions, only to find themselves squared off against the Enterprise again in the next naval battle. She was decommissioned in 1947 and finished the war with 20 battle stars, more than any other American ship in World War II.
Enterprise and the Pacific Fleet is about to set off on one of the longest naval campaigns in world history. It will mark the start of 560 days of war before she can go home.
Number 5. USS Constitution, Old Ironsides. The USS Constitution first set sail from Boston Harbor in 1797, and, remarkably, you can still find her there today.
Cannonballs are ricocheting off the sides, and a sailor sees this happen live action and shouts out, "Huzzah, her sides are made of iron!" And it's a rallying cry for all sailors that are fighting in the war that we have ships so strong they're almost as if they're made of iron.
Perhaps best known as Old Ironsides, she became famous during the War of 1812, where she fought against Britain and defeated 5 British warships, including the frigates HMS Guerriere and HMS Java. This was especially impressive as the British Navy was considered the most powerful in the world at the time.
Constitution came back into Boston to a hero's welcome, and then 2 more American frigates had victories following that. So in the fall, we were beating Britain, Queen of the Seas, something no one had ever imagined in their lifetime.
She officially retired in 1881, but is still fully commissioned and equipped with a 60-man crew. Number 4, Yamato and Musashi. The Japanese battleship Yamato and its sister ship Musashi were the mightiest warships in the entirety of human history, being both the most armed and the heaviest battleships. Yamato was armed with 9 18-inch guns, the largest ever mounted on a ship, and displaced roughly 72,000 tons when fully loaded. No ships have been built since to overtake its size, and it represents the apex of Japanese battleship design. Despite its power, it saw relatively little action, only firing her main guns at enemies in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. In April 1945, it was sunk by Americans, highlighting the rise of air power in naval warfare and showing the end of an era dominated by battleships. Number 3, USS Arizona. Whether you are an avid military history buff or not, you've probably heard of the USS Arizona.
But the big ship meant to fight in the open sea fell to the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor that brought the U.S. into World War II.
Representing American resolve and sacrifice, the Arizona was hit by a Japanese bomb during the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. She was blown up and sank, killing 1,177 people and pushing the United States into World War II. She could not be salvaged, and today she remains at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, below the USS Arizona Memorial, which attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. Number 2, Bismarck. For hundreds of years, the Royal Navy was the most feared fleet in all the world. But in 1941, they met their match.
She was the battleship Bismarck. Surprisingly, her lifespan was that of a butterfly, just over a week. But that was enough for her to sink her dragon's teeth into the pride of the British fleet.
The Bismarck was over 800 feet long and could travel at a speed of 30 knots, making it one of the biggest and fastest ships in the world at the time. She sank the near-invincible HMS Hood and badly damaged the HMS Prince of Wales, sending the Royal Navy in hot pursuit. The Bismarck abandoned the Atlantic due to damage, however, and was attacked by the British off the coast of France just days later.
The nation of Great Britain rejoiced. The Bismarck had been sunk, and the Hood had been avenged.
She was scuttled by her crew, and the wreck was finally found in 1989 by Robert Ballard, the same man who found the Titanic.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications.
Number 1, HMS Victory. A truly majestic ship, the HMS Victory is one of the largest wooden ships ever built and represents the remarkable power of the Royal Navy during the 18th and 19th centuries.
Victory is an engineering marvel, one of the biggest ships of her time. It took 6,000 oak trees to build her, clearing 100 acres of woodland.
Serving as Lord Nelson's flagship at 1805's Battle of Trafalgar, the Victory helped lead the British to victory over the Spanish and French, despite the British being outnumbered. The ship was allegedly saved by the first Sea Lord's wife, who was moved to tears upon hearing of its proposed destruction. Currently, the Victory serves as a museum in Portsmouth, England, and remains the oldest commissioned warship in the world.
Open to the general public, the first-rate 100-gun HMS Victory remains a living monument to the courage and determination of those who fought with Nelson during the Napoleonic Wars.
Were there any powerful warships we forgot to include? Let us know in the comments section.
A marvel in 1954, the Nautilus, still a marvel today. Check this out, and get this. This is the only nuclear-powered U.S. naval vessel that's still available for the public to visit.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.